Hello and welcome to Confronting Injustice. I am your host, Linda Solomon, joined by my our co-host James Watson, as we discuss the injustices of the criminal legal system. Our guest today is Stacey Borden. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. We appreciate you coming back. We talked about so much during our last interview. There was a lot we didn't get in, so we appreciate you coming back.
Thank you.
Absolutely. What I'd like to start with is the last time we ended with, or the focus of our last show was about the influencers in your life, the people who really impacted your life. Mm-hmm. And you identified your parents, Judge Coffey, and then like Angie and a few other women who really made a difference in your life. And so we thought about what is it that you think your mom, Judge Coffey, Angie, and others saw in you that you didn't see in yourself? What do you think that was?
That's a good question, Linda. I'm not quite sure because I was a total mess. And often that's hard to say about yourself. You know what I mean? And, you know, every time I went into the prison system, Angie was always focused. I'm pointing my hand because we lived in huts on the compound, right? There were like 68 rooms in each hut, if I'm not mistaken.
68?
Or, yeah, there was like 4 different rows. And it might have been more. Wow. But I think it was 68 per hut, and it was 5 huts. I was always on this side. It was almost like the bad people in Pioneer. The huts were Pioneer, Town Line, Algon, or Laurel, Algon. Maybe it was 4 huts. And then you had Brewster 1, Brewster 2, which were really for substance abuse users, alcoholics. And then the institution that held, you know, the schools, the church, the barbershops, all that, the kitchen. And then you had the hospital wing, HSU, yes. Or C, whatever it was called, right? HSU, yep.
Same thing, SU, the ad building, same thing you described.
Yeah.
Workshop is the barbershop.
Workshop was in the institution.
Right, the ad building, then you got the headquarters, which is the OIC, which is the law library.
Law library.
The law library property, it's, you know, means all in one building.
That's right.
And the controls.
Same thing.
And where were you?
I was in Town Line this past sentence.
Is this Framingham?
Framingham State Prison.
Okay, all right.
And Angie was always, I watched her in the other, Julie Pike, I watched them two come in the 90s when I was sentenced, 91. But all them years, my mind just thought they were in and out like me. I had no idea they never left. I was just oblivious, you know what I mean? And so Angie and Julie was always in the units that I was in somehow, or she would move around some, but between the two, white woman, Julie, Angie, black woman, you know, between the two, they were always like focused. And I always admired that. I was a little bit closer with Julie because she was always on this side, either Pioneer or Town Line. Okay. Angie was always on that side. It was almost like this is the good unit, or someone who can be conformed to mind their business. I was always in trouble. Okay. And not to say Julie was, but Julie was always innovative. Okay. And you know, prisons don't want you to be innovative and creative. And I say that because Angie was more focused on school and education and minding her business.
Even with a life sentence?
Even with a natural.
Yes.
Julie Pike had a life sentence, which was 2nd degree.
Okay.
She had possibility of parole. And when I say Julie being innovative, she was part of starting the NEEDS program, which was training dogs. She was part of creating Braille in the prison.
Really?
So the NEEDS program is training dogs for handicap out of the community. And so was Braille. And then she was part of the READ program, like developing books, part of House of Healing.
Like
right?
a literacy program.
Literacy
Okay,
program.
okay.
And then they ventured out to start advocating to cultivate vegetables. And they kept trying to knock her down.
Okay.
But she wouldn't knock
Who's
them.
they?
The system, the administrators.
Okay.
So first when they started the vegetable gardens, you couldn't take them to the units. It was almost a conflict, like we can't share our canteen, so you can't bring vegetables and share.
Really? So what
So
were they
that-
doing with the food that was in that
You know,
was being
that-
grown in the garden?
That's a good question. I always wondered, I think it was for administrators, for culinary art, because they did have culinary art.
Okay.
And so when the individuals, prisoners cooked for their culinary, it really fed the gods. And so I suspect the vegetables went into culinary.
Okay.
Where else did it go? My
Interesting.
last year is when Julie started being able to bring the collard greens, the vegetables, the tomatoes to the unit. But at that time, they were taking the stoves out and putting microwaves in.
Oh, interesting.
So, and I didn't see all that until now. I
Right.
can hindsight see how the system suppresses and oppresses you.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean? And so that one day that Angie took me by the yard, as much as I admired her, there were times we speak, there was times we wouldn't. We just went about our days. But this particular day, before I went in front of Judge Coffey, is when she walked me in that yard and said those words to me.
Okay.
That the next time you come in here, you're gonna have a natural. You're gonna do something. And that really shocked me because I had no idea. Like, you never left, you never got a bail, you never finished a sentence and wrapped up, you never got parole, you never went home? We're talking about 25 years.
Yeah. That's interesting that,
Or really 20, because I got out in 2010 and I made a promise that that's unacceptable.
right.
I'm coming back to get you. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I wasn't talking about breaking in there and
Right,
kidnapping.
right.
I'm being like, we gotta figure this out. Like, what happens?
So
That's
when the
right.
system put you in there, we're gonna turn around and use the system to get you out, and that's exactly what you did.
And that's what we all are talking about, criminal legal. I'm
Right.
glad you're not talking about the criminal justice, because
Yeah.
there just ain't no justice in none of this, you know?
Well, two things. One, and during the last interview, you said you're an abolitionist and you're a disruptor.
That's right.
But before you talk about that, I'm wondering your mindset when you were going in and out and didn't realize that Angie and other women had never gotten out.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if it speaks to when you're in the thick of things, you just don't see clearly.
Yeah. I couldn't see clearly. I was in my mental health. And that is almost like I don't know what term, I can't think of a term to use, but that's like a no-no to talk about, right? And so I was in a state of mind that, let me just tell you a little short story of how I could really explain. I'm going to court one particular day, and when you go to court, you're in this big cell down in admissions. And everybody's down there going to court in one big cell. Imagine a bunch of women, about 30 of us or 40 of us in one room, a little smaller than this. And there's only some benches, and there's the sink, and people are putting makeup on upside down, and there's really no mirrors, and people are in their destructive behavior. And all you hear is the transportation come in with all the shackles. Clack, 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 for every county, Essex County, Middlesex County, Suffolk County, Bristol County, all the counties are coming in to transport us to court. And all of a sudden there's this white woman that was so scared that sat next to me. She was fragile, older, alcoholic. And she didn't know what was going on. Now I had already been there 9-10 months, right, waiting trial. She sits next to me and my mind says, oh boy, here we go. She's crying. Now, why did she choose me? I don't know. Do I have counselor or support system written up my head? I don't know.
Spirit.
But in that moment, I'm hearing all the clacks, the shackles and all, and I'm looking at all the women, and something went through me. And then I looked at her and I said, girlfriend, I too was kidnapped. I too, like there's little blue people walking around with keys and they keep locking us in rooms. And I was scaring the mess out of her. But more so, I was scaring myself. I'm like, Stacey, this is reality. You literally are in some type of a system with people in blue suits with keys, because she kept saying, but I got my own keys. I said, I do too. I don't know what they did with my apartment, my bed, my car. I don't know what they did with my stuff. But I'm telling you, I've been stuck in here for 11 months or whatever I said to her. Right. But I scared her so bad, I felt bad that I scared myself. The reality was, what type of system do we have that you can literally take a human being and not give them no kind of information of what you're getting ready to do to them? No comfort, no instruction. No, I mean, instructions for sure. Like, sit in there and be quiet. We'll feed you when we feel like it.
There's more rules than
That's right.
Than guidance.
It's so harsh that this fragile woman suffering from alcoholism that had never been arrested, that you just stuck in this room like that and didn't even tell her what is going on, that a transportation person is going to shackle her up and link her to me. I don't use the words dangerous and all that. People cause harm because they've been harmed. You're not in that condition just because. Right. And something woke me up. Something kept going through me. I literally had to think like, you're really allowing these people in blue suits to control your whole being? To lock me in a room? Where I really literally had my own apartment and my own keys. I knew what was going on with it. My parents were helping me in supporting, holding my apartment. But she didn't. She had no clue. And she was me.
Interesting.
It was dysfunctional. It's called mental illness. And that word is what we never want to talk about. Right. We can call it trauma. That's under the umbrella. Right. Something happens in a person's brain. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist as much as I want to go back to school for my PhD. But something happens and shifts in the brain when you're disrupted.
Absolutely.
Now, I call myself a disruptor because I was disrupted. When my sexual trauma happened very early, and then again at 18, and then my drug addiction, that disrupts your brain process.
Absolutely.
Right? You shift somewhere. In my world, I went into a dissociative disorder. I disassociated with people, places, and things. And my world was substances to keep me stable and alive. That was how I dealt with my trauma. And so when we look at the criminal legal system, it's so harshly designed that it's almost like this whole wall that they can't hear any of that. Right. What they do to human beings is unacceptable. Yeah. And so in my world, clear-minded, I still have my mental illness. I still have my depressions. I still, at times, my brain disassociates. Sometimes I see you coming and but I've been practicing. You develop tools to stay present and grounded, right? And so my world is to disrupt this type of system that can oppress individuals to that level.
Right.
Some of us can't come out of it.
Right. Two things. One, we know research clearly demonstrates that trauma can actually change the shape of your brain.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
The word disrupted is real because it happens. And far too many people choose not to do anything about that trauma because it's too much for them. We're curious about, you were victimized, were caught up in a cycle of abuse, and then you became a disruptor of the system, and you went back and got Angie help.
Yeah.
Right? You went, that was a tremendous transformation. So your story is, among other things, a story of hope because you made it through.
Yeah. I kept my promise, Linda.
You kept your promise. So can you talk about the being a disruptor, going back into courts, and even just how you, as a disruptor, got someone out who wasn't supposed to ever get out.
That's right. So, you know, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. But I do study the brain and I study behavior, and I've tried to understand mental illness with my degree. Right? To a certain extent, I didn't want to become a mental health or a licensed mental health counselor, because you're dealing with so many disorders. And that I just wanted to concentrate on trauma and addiction, right? And so when I walk into courtrooms, sometimes mothers call me about their sons or their daughters, or whoever might call me. I mean, judges know me. You know, I walk into court and I'm just as normal. I talk about logic. Why do we have to sentence someone? Why do we have to continuously believe that crime and punishment is the way to go?
When
someone's already
there
punished.
were other options, and we've spoken about there were many other options.
That's right. They have the discretion. In our system, I'm still trying to figure out if we're in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. When you're in a courtroom, you often hear the judge says, I'm going to agree with the Commonwealth. And I'm like, well, we're not the Commonwealth? Then that means you could agree with me too. Because I'm not understanding why you have to agree with this logic and not agree with this logic. Right. Why do we even have this type of system? Why don't we have a healing system? Why don't you, I'm really studying and writing in my free time of how do we even transform and have correctional officers, police officers come in and be more coaches, be more, advocates in the community than policing. Because all that is harm.
It is.
How do we begin taking institutions, courtrooms, prisons, and make them healing centers? And then let me tell you why. I have a mother who called me maybe 7 months ago.
Okay.
Her name is Miss Cargrove. She has a son that was in South Bay. Little Mr. Cargrove, who has autism, 35 years old.
And he's in prison with just...
Come on, Linda, let me tell you something. When she called me, she said, Stacey, my name is Miss Cargrove. People told me that you might be able to help me. My son just got beat up bad and is in the hospital with a wired jaw. I said, what jail is he? What prison? She said, he's in South Bay jail. I said, he's in jail? Not a prison? And he got a wired jaw? What happened?
And he has autism?
He's autistic. So first thing I thought was, well, what was he sentenced for? 3 driving offenses. So you mean to tell me we have a court system that a judge could say, oh, 3 strikes you're out because you didn't get a driver's license, and you keep driving without a license, so you sentence them into a jail?
With hardened criminals.
Did you even ask why you're not getting a license? Did you ask, can you pass the test? Do you have a little space in your court building to send someone in there to give them a fine and make them take a test? Maybe you would have found out he had autism. Maybe you would have found out he couldn't even read and write. Okay, sorry he's driving without a license. But now he has a wired jaw. You know why he has a wired jaw? Because as an autistic child in a man's body, he keeps calling his mother saying, Mommy, they're beating people up in here. So retaliatory. The guards go to his cell and say, oh, you a mama's boy? And stick their foot in the door. And he said, why you all in here? And they beat him. Jumped right on him. And guess who got the charges?
He did.
He did.
Yeah.
So what do? I walk in the Roxbury court. I could see the DA's file, got his beat up, black eyes, wired jaw. He's sitting there. He still shows some scars. He's still drinking from a straw. And before they even start talking, I jump up to tell Judge Weingart, what are we doing? Well, I don't, in my eyes, he's finishing his sentence, but he's the one who's charged. Now, when it happened, I called everybody, all the state reps, senators. I put them all on one email. I referred the mother to the Attorney General's office, the civil rights matter. I referred to the Prisoners Legal Services, everybody all hands on deck. Because this, but what did they do? They remove him and send him to Worcester and keep the guards in the prison, in the
Now,
jail.
you said it was the guards who beat him up, not the inmates.
It was the guards. And let's refrain from some language. Let me just say we don't use that term inmates
Okay.
because it's derogatory.
Okay.
These are all these little things that we need to disrupt.
Okay.
Inmate. Imagine the derogatory and derivative term. It comes in. I didn't choose to go and mate in your prison with anybody. Right?
That's clear. That's right.
I didn't choose to mate. You put two people in a cage, they're bound to mate. We got a whole predatory system. Not just the individuals in prison, but the guards too. Right. Across the country, people are raping each other, thinking about how to, so that word derives from that place. And most of these prisons are on plantations, and that type of genetic self is in them, from which, especially black and brown people, from which we came from, being forced to mate. So that term,
Okay. Well, that.
every time I'm with
eliminate
somebody,
that.
I gotta correct them on the
Absolutely.
language,
I
because
appreciate
we're
you
not.
doing that.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
This is some deep stuff, Linda, and this is
Yeah.
why I call myself a disruptor. All those things. You know, we come out of prison, they call us felons. You take us out of a community and put us into an unnatural, violent environment community together. And then when we get out and we come back to our own community, you say we can't be together?
That's another.
This is my family.
That's
you took me
another.
away from my natural habitat. You put me in your environment
Right.
with my same people. And then you call us criminals and felons and junkies and all these derogatory, and inmates and all these derogatory terms. But then we come back home, we can't talk to each other, or else we go back.
And I think, just for clarification, because people should know this. So if someone, once you get out of jail, if you are in communication with someone who you were almost family with in jail,
That's right.
you could go back to prison.
Well, I think we changed that now. You don't see that many. We have parole officers, we have POs, but mainly parole officers. Federal parole officers do what they call spot checks. At any moment, you're liable to see them anywhere, driving by, in a grocery store, they're watching you, they come in your place of employment. The employers don't even know who you are, especially if you're working in sales or in the store. You don't know that they're there. And 9 times out of 10, they're doing that to see what you're doing, see who you're communicating with, see if you're in on time, see if you're, dealing with. I remember one young man, I don't want to say his name because I never had his permission, but I remember one young man came back to our participatory defense,
Right.
which is how I got Angie out.
Okay.
Participatory defense through Families for Justice Healing. He came to a meeting one night and he said, Stacey, I'm having a hard time with my PO. I said, why? What are you doing? You got to walk the straight line until you don't have to have him no more. Oh, he came to my job and questioned why I'm around 3 different women. I'm like, do you have 3 girlfriends? He's like, whether I do or not, is it? I said, not my business.
Right.
If they're your friends, they're your friends. But if whatever your background history is what they're going to relate to. He said, I don't have no abuse in my background of women. And I'm like, well, that's unacceptable. The next day he called me, he got put on a violation, so he's on home confinement, 6 o'clock curfew, which prevented him from going to see his friends, right?
Interesting.
And then he got sent back.
Because of his relationship with his probation
They
officer.
said he had too many women acquaintances. Can you imagine? Now this was, of course, right before COVID. But this is why I'm saying, we have to keep disrupting these thoughts, and we have to start having these conversations to change the ideology, the mindset, the same status quo of how they've been treating people coming out of these prison environments. And I was hoping that, maybe we could do a 3rd show, because we really need to talk about what happens with us, people like us, James and I, coming out of that environment that are trying to help people navigate, and they don't want to fund us to do that. Funding is big.
It's
when you have organizations.
And what's the best person that can assist me coming out on parole? It's somebody who's on parole. You know what I mean? But they said we can't communicate. Well, you want me to talk to this stranger, this counselor, him or her? Doesn't make a difference. You know. But who know nothing about me? But this person knows a whole lot. He can relate, or she can relate on what I went through, what
Lived
I'm going to go
experience,
through.
that's right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And where I'm trying to get to. You know what I mean?
Right.
Without judging me. You know what I mean? But you got this person here, like you say, parole officer, probation officer. You know what I mean? I can't talk to you because you're on parole. Right. And this can be a family member.
That's right.
This could be my brother. He's on parole, so I can't be in the same house with him because I'm a convicted felon. That's
and
crazy.
that still is happening.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
If you have a family member at home, or if your family member has Section 8, you're not able to go into that environment, that home.
Yeah, it's
So you're displaced again.
it is placed.
And you're right, James. I mean, people with lived experience can understand each other more than someone who, even if you worked in the prison, you didn't live in the prison.
Right.
You have no idea where I come from and what I've experienced, other than someone with lived experience who is now in a state of mind to give the guidance.
Right. Well, we just have a few moments left, and so we may have to have you come back to talk about the other side of that.
Series.
But
Let's make it a series, because there's a lot to talk about.
there is, and people with lived experience have a lot to say.
Yeah.
And we have a lot to learn. Educators,
Yeah.
there are people out there working with young people and with adults who need to hear what you have to say.
That's right.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And so we need to just be more aware, attuned, and be more of a disruptor.
Yeah.
Because evil prevails when good
Because
people
we can do
nothing.
it. We can do it. We can
Absolutely.
change. I want to say Atlanta, Women on the Rise in Atlanta, worked on disrupting the Fulton County Jail. There's like 3 or 4 jails in Atlanta, right? Before you even get to the prison. I don't even know the name of the prison because they always focus on it.
Okay.
And so I think finally they got one of them closed and they made it a healing center.
Wonderful. Oh, well, we definitely have to hear about that.
That is should be our focus.
We
How do we have a governor who shut down 3 male jails, not because she shut them down because they weren't no good, because the population is lessened, right? We have the lowest incarceration population in history, this
Wonderful.
state. And so,
So
jails
this-
are closing. Can we use them buildings to
this-
make them healing centers?
That would be
Yes.
incredible.
We got
so
1
we have
minute.
to talk about
We
that.
got 1 minute.
So we'd like to thank you. We'd like to thank our guest, Stacey Borden, for being here with us. And we thank the audience for watching.
Thank you.
And we always want to leave with, when you hear things that you hear for the first time, we want you to do something with that information. Just don't sit on that information. We all have a role to play in this. And we love to continue the conversation.
Yeah,
And-
can I shout out? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what the shout out too. There was a fire in Norfolk. The building's condemned. They say the building's condemned because the fire went through the roof in the unit.
Recent?
1-1. Yes, it's
Yeah.
recent. Yeah, they got them in spread out. Unit 1-1 has called a fire. And I guess it was the 3rd floor. But the guys can't go back in there. The stuff, the illegal stuff, it might be ruined and everything. But they need support as far as getting on their feet because they're doing it's hard times.
Okay,
And
we need to
shout-
get
and
that
shout
message
outs.
out
Yeah,
to all of our
to-
organizations.
And their loved ones to help them with it.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
Okay, Stacey, you have a
Care package or
shout out?
something.
Just a shout out to say we really are looking for some support as we transition from a residential to an adult reentry day center.
Nice.
So we can help men and women come out of the penitentiary. And so look us up at www.nbreentry.org.
Okay, wonderful.
Give us some support.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank
And
you.
that could be volunteering. It could be a number of things.
That's right. That's
Wonderful.
right. We're going to have an array of services in that one house.
Wonderful.
We have AA and A meetings coming in. We're going to help the recovering community. We're going to help the returning community. We're going to
Wonderful.
help people that are suffering. Just come in, but we need help. We need
Okay.
books. We need food, can drives. We got a book pantry outside on the lawn and a
Wonderful.
food pantry.
Wonderful.
So if you just drive by and drop some canned goods, that would be great.
Wonderful.
And some books, so we
All
can
right.
make sure our community reads.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.